Good morning. Yak'n Pastor here with our fourth and final video looking at the love story of all ages, the story of Ruth and Boaz, and the 5 biblical principles of dating found within that relationship. And we start in verse 7. Again, this is chapter 3, verse 7. It says, When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" He asked. She said, "I'm your servant Ruth." She said, "Spread your corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family." Okay, we know that this took place at the end of the harvest. They'd had a harvest dinner. Naomi had told Ruth to go down and to take a bath and put on her finest clothes and look to see where Boaz laid down at night, and then to go lay at his feet after he was asleep, and then to tell him that she wanted her to, sorry, tell Boaz that Ruth wanted him to be her kinsman redeemer. Okay, so here's the kinsman redeemer. It was a Jewish custom that was involved. It really helped the family continue on, the family lines and the property that were assigned to each one of the Jewish families when they came into the promised land. Normally, that land would pass down through the oldest son, and then that son would take care of the mother. But if there was no son, then the kinsman redeemer process came into play. And what this was the closest male relative to the deceased husband would take on the role to basically provide for that widow by marrying that widow. And then their first son together would take on the name of the deceased husband, and all the property that was assigned would go through that son, then that new son that took on the deceased father's name. Listen what Ruth and Boaz's conversation involves here in verse 10. It says, "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "This kindness is greater than that which you've shown earlier. You have not run after younger men, whether rich or poor." Boaz is obviously a much older man. He refers to her as his daughter. And again, she has asked him to be her kinsman redeemer. She has asked him to basically invoke this clause and marry her. That's essentially what she's saying. Um, but I think it really surprised Boaz to see how transparent and vulnerable Ruth was. Because he says this, he says, "And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. All the people in my town know that you are a woman of noble character." So in other words, not only have you shown yourself to be a woman of great character, that you've taken refuge under the wings of the Almighty God, that you've taken care of your mother-in-law the way you have, but you've shown kindness in choosing me, an older man, to marry you and provide for you. Um, Obviously, she had options. She could have gone to the younger men, but she chose Boaz instead. And it says that this is his chance to be vulnerable with her, comes in verse 12. It says, "Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there's another who's more closely related than I." So there's another male relative who's closer to her deceased husband in the line than Boaz is, and he gets first right of refusal. It says in verse 13, "Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he's not willing," listen to this, "if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until the morning." So Boaz makes Ruth a promise that's birthed out of her vulnerability to him and his vulnerability to her, and the fact that they're communicating very openly to each other. um, Boaz basically says that there's somebody who's closer than he is. But if this guy is not willing, Boaz is absolutely 100% in. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, "No one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor." See, Boaz is continuing to show concern for Ruth's reputation because of her character. And he gives her more food as a gesture that he's going to do what he said he's going to do. He says in verse 15, he also said, "Bring me the shawl you are wearing and hold it out." And when she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Then he went back to town. Well, Ruth went home to her mother Naomi, mother-in-law, and Naomi asked, "How did it go, my daughter?" Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her and added, "He gave me the 6 measures of barley, saying, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." See, Naomi knows that she sees the heart of Boaz, and she knows that he will not settle, he will not relax until this matter is settled and Ruth is taken care of. It's a beautiful story in here. And then we get into chapter 4, and listen to what it says here in verse 1. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there, just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. In other words, his relative comes by. He says, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. The town gate was usually where business took place, because it was easy to find 10 witnesses to validate any agreements that were made. Verse 2, Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here." And they did so. And then he said to the guardian redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I would bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not tell me, so that I will know, for no one has the right to do it except you, and then I'm next in line. I will redeem it," he said. So, in other words, the relative is presented with what the issue is. The issue is there's this land to buy in order to be passed down, kept in the family and passed down, and he's first in line to do it. But Boaz says very clearly, if you're not willing to do it, I will do it. Of course, the relative wanted a good piece of property. But watch how Boaz shows his negotiation skills. He set this up very, very nicely. Here's the opportunity. Here's this nice piece of property that's available to you. Do you want it? Sure, I want it. Okay, now verse 5. Then Boaz says, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." Okay, so in other words, Boaz is laying this out very clearly. Listen, this isn't just a land deal. This is a kinsman redeemer widow deal. You understand, your first son with her is going to be passing on that property, taking on that property. At this, the guardian redeemer said, "Then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself, I cannot do it." So the relative turns down this opportunity to redeem the land, and Ruth the Moabite widow is available for Boaz to follow through on his promise. And listen to what he says. "Now, in the earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to be final, one party took off a sandal and gave it to the other. This is a method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, 'Buy it yourself,' and he removed a sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, 'Today you are witnesses that I bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or his hometown. Today you are witnesses.'" And it says, "Now the elders and all the people at the gate said, 'We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephraim and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be that of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah.'" See, here's the beautiful thing about this. Boaz wants to marry Ruth. Ruth wants Boaz to be her kinsman redeemer. He is quick in making his agreement before the witnesses of Israel so that it cannot be taken back. And the benefit to this is he gets Ruth the Moabitess, but he also gets this beautiful blessing that his his children, his family will become well known, will be richly blessed, I guess is a good way to say that. Verse 13 says this: So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to be conceived, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, Praise be the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter in law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The woman living there said, Naomi has a son. And they named him Obed. He was father of Jesse, the father of David. Now you understand this. Ruth becomes or will become the great grandmother of King David, the first king of Israel. So Ruth and Boaz obviously start this family of their own. They've displayed this beauty in their hearts through their open communication and honesty. And what we look at here, the principle we look at is open, vulnerable communication. That's our number 4 principle, open, vulnerable communication. Why is that so important? Because it's one of the biggest areas of frustration in relationships, especially in marriages. Couples talk before they get married or while they're dating. They communicate, and but all of a sudden when they get married, other things interrupt, family interrupts, or work interrupts, or whatever the case, and that communication starts dying out. And it's interesting that the statistics have shown that the number 2 time for divorce is after 20 years, 20 to 25 years in that time period. And why? Because the kids have been raised, and you're now strangers. You haven't spent time continuing to develop that relationship, to continuing to be open and transparent with each other, vulnerable with each other. It's been more of a greeting and a hello and good and goodbye and good morning and good night, instead of that continuing that friendship and that open communication. So it's at the list of the reasons, the top of the list for reasons for why people divorce. Here's one of the other things that's interesting. Men generally have fewer words than women to share. That has been an issue for many, many years. Um, but what happens is oftentimes men expend their words for the day through work and through lunch or whatever the case may be. And women don't. They still have many words to share. And so um, not being able to share those words, not being able to communicate, a husband coming home and shutting down, a wife after her long day at work wants to talk things out, and they don't. So what about communication? Are there multiple forms of communication? Are there ways to communicate if talking is not your main thing? Well, obviously verbal is number 1, but there's written communication that's available. There's physical communication, and there's body language. Um, I have a habit of rolling my eyes when I'm unhappy about something, and that drives my wife crazy. That's not a good communication tactic. And sometimes body language does that for us. We do things without recognizing that shut down the communication or shut down the conversation or cause it to go in a different direction. Um, which brings up rules for fair fighting. There's Dr. Nathan Cobb wrote a list out of the 10 rules of fair fighting. And there's certain things like don't raise your voice, don't swear at each other, don't continually bring up the past, and some other things. Here's a critical thing that I've had to learn. Not everything is personal. Don't take it all that it's about you. There can be issues that your spouse has or your person in your dating relationship that have nothing whatsoever to do with you. And in communicating, they're communicating what's going on. But when you take it all in yourself, you stop listening. You stop paying attention because it becomes all about you, and the communication breaks down. Dr. Gary Chapman wrote a book called The 5 Love Languages, and basically they're words of affirmation. Each person has a different love language. Each person has a different method that they feel loved. Okay, that communication is kicked through language wise. Some people it's words of affirmation. Some people it's spending quality time. Some people it's acts of service. Some people it's giving of gifts. Some people it's physical touch. But also, communication involves not keeping secrets. In the marriage counseling I've done, in the pre-marriage counseling I've done, it's interesting how many things don't come up that really need to be talked about. Um, Finances are a major factor. What things are still owed if you're considering marrying somebody? How's their credit? Are there bills that haven't been paid? Are there bills that are still owed? Those things need to come into play because they're going to affect your budget. What about spending habits? Are you a saver or are you a spender? Do you take care of the need first before the want, or the want before the need? Um, Past relationships and baggage that might be in those relationships, being able to talk through those things and work through those things together, knowing that you're going to be able to express your feelings and not be looked down upon or not be unvalidated in that way. Feelings are important. And again, it may seem like there's no reason for the feelings you're feeling. The one person might feel like, well, you're overrating this, or but sometimes there's triggers from the past that come into play. And so that's where that open vulnerability comes in, of having a place where you feel safe enough to say, listen, this is what's happened in my past, and this is how it's affecting our relationship, or going to affect our relationship. And then we see our fifth biblical principle, which is follow through on commitments. Again, Boaz did exactly what he told Ruth he was going to do. And again, this is another area in relationships that's full of minefields, absolutely full of minefields. Lots of people say things during the dating process in order to win that other person over. Promises are made. Um, the thought is, well, I'm going to be exactly the way in marriage that I am dating. Um, and then it comes out that there's a totally different person that ends up in the marriage relationship. So um, problems come up when promises fail to materialize. So it's dangerous, and potentially dangerous for the whole relationship to blow up when one person thinks that something has been committed to, and the other person says, I don't remember that at all. Obviously, that's an open minefield that could cause huge issues. And so conversations need to take place. Now, does that mean, if you communicate, if you do all these things, will you never argue? Will you never fight? Will you never have any conflict? No. Whenever you put two people together, you are going to, at some point in time, have some conflict. You're going to have some disagreements or some misunderstandings. But the key is being able to work through those things together. And the reason they're so important is because working those things out together, being able to talk through them, and sometimes it involves a timeout. Things get heated and you need to take some time out and just say, listen, can we table this for a minute or so? Some people, it's hard to table things. Sometimes they need to get it through right then and there. But you need to figure out what works for you, that is not degrading or demoralizing to that other person, but still allows you to be who you are, because that builds trust and respect. Honesty does. Um, Sometimes identifying potential areas of conflict helps. That might be attitudes or actions, behavior patterns. You know, um, Certain things lead to certain things. So being able to identify those things before they take place makes communication much better, as far as not arguing and fighting all the time. Um, Setting realistic expectations. You talk about doing something, you commit to doing something. Well, when is it going to be done? There's an expectation on both sides there. This is what I've promised I'm going to do, and this is what you promised. So here's the very easy to define if it's been done or not, if it's a goal that you both have understood. Um, so establishing results, a way to measure results that's agreeable to both of you. And what about clearly defined consequences for when expectations are not met? develop a support system, an outside accountability. If there's some issues that you're trying to work through, uh, find some people that you can talk to, that you can have a, a vulnerable conversation with, an honest, vulnerable conversation with, not necessarily divulging all that's going on in your life, but being able to talk through with people who have that relationship with the Lord, who have that wisdom, and to be able to guide. That's what a support system is for. Listen to what 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 7 say. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes. It always perseveres. See, the thing about a relationship and these 5 biblical principles: a shared common faith, build on friendship, sexual purity, practicing sexual purity, open communication, vulnerability, and then following through on your commitments. What it does is it shows your love. It shows it wants the best for the other person. That's what this set of verses tells us. Love is patient, love is kind. Not everything doesn't set you off. Everything doesn't cause you to be angry and frustrated and say things that you shouldn't say. It's not envious when something good happens to the other person. It's not envious that I wish that had happened to me. It's being grateful that it happened to this other person. It's being supportive and encouraging. It's not self-seeking. It's not all about me. It's not easily angered. And wrongs, there's not a score sheet of who's done something wrong to somebody else. It doesn't delight in evil, but it rejoices with truth. The truth is this: you love each other. You got in this relationship for a reason. So stick with that. But also understanding that you're not in this relationship alone. God's in the middle of this relationship with you if you have that shared common faith. He's there to help. He's there to encourage. So my prayer is this: if you're dating and you haven't found your Ruth or Boaz yet, while you're looking, think about what it would take for you to be Ruth or Boaz. Are there areas of your own life, your own walk with the Lord, that need to change so that you could be that Boaz or that Ruth? It's not just up to them to be Boaz or Ruth. It's up to you to be Boaz or Ruth, whichever side needs to be done. Okay? And understand this too. It takes time to build that kind of relationship. It takes time and it takes a lot of effort. Marriage is probably the second hardest relationship to build and to keep. Your relationship with the Lord is probably the hardest because there's so many things pulling on it. But they're both the most worthwhile relationships. When you're centered in your relationship with the Lord, when you're on your relationship with Him matters more than anything else. And having this mind in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, taking on the character, if you will, of God, that the outward look and heart condition of God, that will translate into your relationship. So practicing these 5 principles: a shared common faith, building on friendship, sexual purity, open and vulnerable communication, and following through on your commitments. I pray that that's what your life looks like, what your relationship looks like.
To view a more in-depth study of these books, click on the playlist, and also like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and our website at yaknpastor.com. Yak'n Pastor out.